Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday, it's October 21st. Today is day 381 since October 7th of last year. An update in terms of what's happening in Gaza. Despite hopes for de-escalation in what the world is calling the Israel-Hamas war, what we're calling the decimation, the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, despite hopes for de-escalation following Israel's killing of the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, fighting has continued and there were some of the highest death tolls in Gaza over the weekend. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that the fighting will continue forward until the end. And Hamas has vowed that Sinwar's killing changes nothing. Hamas will choose their new leader soon, according to senior Hamas officials. There were a total of 87 people killed or missing and another 40 people wounded following a missile attack on Saturday in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. I talked about that just a little bit yesterday, but that death toll was confirmed at least 87 people. It marks one of the highest casualty tolls in months. The Israeli military has said that they're investigating the incident. Israel has made clear to the US and major European countries that it's not acting to remove the entire civilian population from North Gaza. Western diplomats from countries told Haaretz, but they said that Israel has not done enough to quiet their fears and that it's difficult to gather reliable information about what's happening inside of Gaza. The only journalists that have been allowed inside of Gaza, Western journalists that is, are journalists that have traveled with the Israeli Defense Forces. The health ministry in Gaza says that the death toll is at least 42,603 Palestinians killed. Those injured is now at least 99,795 since October 7th of last year. President Biden told reporters during his visit to Berlin on Friday that Sinwar's death is a chance to seek a path to peace, but he acknowledged that a ceasefire will be harder to achieve in Gaza than in Lebanon. He indicated his plans to send Secretary Blinken to Israel sometime this week. The THAAD missile system, the system that the United States sent to Israel, is now in place. There are also U.S. troops there to operate it, according to Lloyd Austin, our Secretary of Defense. The U.S. Justice Department last week indicted two brothers from Sudan, or Sudanese brothers, who are linked to an October 7th cyber attack that impaired Israel's warning system on that day. So they were just indicted by the U.S. Justice Department. A few hundred people, including many families and several government ministers, gathered on the south border of Israel for 2 days of a conference that was called Preparing to Resettle Gaza. At the event, the far-right National Security Minister of Israel, Ben-Gvir, said that he will encourage voluntary transfer of all Gazan citizens. He said, "We will offer them the opportunity to move to other countries because the land," referring to the land of Gaza, "belongs to us," referring to Israeli Jews. Biden, France's Macron, Britain's Starmer, and Germany's Scholz on Friday discussed the implications of Hamas's Sinwar's death for the Gaza war. Tensions between Israel and Europe remain high, with Israel's foreign minister announcing that he's taking legal and diplomatic measures against France's Macron and Macron's decision to ban Israeli companies from an arms fair in Paris. Now, some are saying that France is the only one that's standing up to Israel in terms of Israeli attacks on Lebanon, the Israeli government attacks on Lebanon. The Lebanese are saying France is the only one that's coming to their aid because of, standing up against those attacks. So what's happening in Lebanon now? I kept hearing over the weekend about how Israel expanded its military campaign to strikes on branches of a bank. And I wanted to explain what that's all about. The bank is a bank that the US and Israel have linked to Hezbollah. The Wall Street Journal published a piece about how attacks were expanding to economic targets. And I thought they might be speaking metaphysically. They're not. These are actually military attacks that the Israeli Air Force struck at least 3 different locations. It sounds like more than that, but these Air Force attacks were airstrikes against 3 different locations by the Israeli Air Force starting last night, Sunday night, in Beirut's southern suburbs, but elsewhere in the country as well. The bank is called Al-Qard Al-Hassan. It's a U.S.-sanctioned bank that was established in the 1980s. It offers financial services to the Shiite community in Lebanon. The U.S. and Israel believe the bank is central to Hezbollah's economic functioning. Haaretz reported today that the IDF claims that the bank holds millions of dollars that are used to finance Hezbollah's activities, including weapons purchases. So these strikes, they mark an expansion of Israel's offensives against Hezbollah that are now targeting an institution that has no overt military purpose. A drone from Lebanon's Hezbollah struck near Netanyahu's private residence over the weekend. This was near Caesarea on the Mediterranean coast. On Saturday, I talked about this previously. Netanyahu and his wife were not home at the time, and Hezbollah fired at least 150 rockets into northern Israel today, according to the IDF. The IDF intercepted 5 drones over the Mediterranean Sea before they entered into Israeli territory. Shortly beforehand, departures from Israeli Ben Gurion Airport were briefly halted. There are a number of Western carriers that have postponed their flights for months, but there are a number of Israeli carriers that are continuing to fly in and out of Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, the U.S. is investigating the leaking of a top secret documents that show Israel's preparations for attacking Iran. It's believed the documents were published by an Iran-affiliated Telegram account on Friday. Secretary Austin said over the weekend that a number of civilian casualties in Lebanon and that number was far too high. He said he would like to see Israel scale back on some of the strikes it is taking, specifically in and around Beirut. The U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein will hold talks with Lebanese officials in Beirut today on conditions for an Israeli-Hezbollah ceasefire. The talks follow reports that Israel gave Washington a document last week outlining its conditions for ending the war in Lebanon. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has been examining the past few weeks options for advancing an outline on a ceasefire in Lebanon, which would give Israel the freedom of military action against threats along its northern border, according to Haaretz. Sources added that Israel is considering whether to condition the end of its ground operations in Lebanon on the appointment of a new moderate Lebanese president, and that the international community is also examining the possibility of placing an international force along the border with a broader mandate than just UNIFIL. The UNIFIL's UN peacekeeping forces are present there and have been caught in a bit of the crossfire the past week. Iran has written to the UN nuclear watchdog to complain that Israel's threats against its nuclear sites, according to a foreign ministry spokesperson there today. So it's Monday, again, it's day 381. That's an update of what has been happening over the last 24 hours or so in the Middle East. May God go before us. Do not give up in your efforts. Continue to call on your elected officials, write op-eds, continue to pray and work towards peace. In the name of Christ, amen.